In this video, I want to discuss a curious omission in the matter of creative writing textbooks, namely the matter of scrotum-tightening prose. It's one of the most vital ingredients you can incorporate into your novel, but you'll look in vain for it in most creative writing handbooks. So I want to look at what scrotum-tightening prose is, why you need it, and how you create it. And to illustrate our theme, we'll be looking at the adventures of Maisie Moppet, a little girl in a 19th century storybook, and see the horrible revenge she took on her uncle when he refused to buy her a bicycle. And we'll also be making the acquaintance of a giant flea. So welcome to another installment in my series on how to write your novel using that most unlikely of writing implements, a round Oxford bus ticket. For inspiration, we're taking the bus down to this place, to the Robert Hooke building, which commemorates the 17th century polymath Robert Hooke, who achieved renown in all sorts of different scientific fields, and also used one of the very first microscopes to examine insects, and he gave us some really quite marvellous engravings of fleas, and fleas will feature large in this tale. So what is scrotum-tightening prose? Well, the phrase comes from James Joyce's Ulysses, the snot-green sea, the scrotum-tightening sea. And this, in my view, is a fantastic example of what James Wood, in his book How Fiction Works, referred to as thisness, which he defines as any detail that draws abstraction to itself and seems to kill that abstraction with a puff of palpability. And examples he cites include Ajax in the Iliad stepping aside to avoid cow shit, or the condemned man described by Orwell in Burma being led to execution, who stepped aside to avoid a puddle. Raymond Chandler was a master of these, and here are a couple of his gems. She smelled the way the Taj Mahal looks by moonlight. Dead men are heavier than broken hearts. And William Fiennes in The Snow Geese talks of male golden-eye ducks throwing their heads back in courtship displays as if swallowing aspirins. And in the short story A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, an angel falls to earth. He had huge buzzard wings, dirty and half-plucked, and the backside of his wings was strewn with parasites. And do you remember Robert Hooke? In 1665 he published his Micrographia, a book containing startling engravings of fleas and other insects, seen for one of the first times using a microscope. Even more impressive is the example of thisness he used to describe a flea. The microscope manifests it to be all over adorned with a curiously polished suit of sable armour, neatly jointed, and beset with multitudes of sharp pins, shaped almost like porcupines' quills or bright conical steel bodkins. So what's so important about thisness? Well, it helps, I think, if we understand a novel as an emotion delivery machine. Readers crave emotion of all description: love, joy, anger, heartbreak, outrage. And we as writers deliver the emotion by using the following process. Firstly, we give them a hero, and we get them to identify with the hero or care about the hero. And then we give the hero a very important quest. And then we thwart the hero in pursuit of the quest, and the reader suffers alongside. And we deliver the whole thing inside the imagination in what is effectively a guided dream. And to understand the role of thisness in this, consider a phrase, a saying from the old days, the golden age of radio. They said that radio drama was superior to drama in the theatre because the scenery was better. So our role as writers is to make the dream as vivid and palpable and realistic as possible, and this is where the thisness comes in. We use imagery and detail to make the dream seem real, to provide the scenery, so to speak. But there's a problem: familiarity. That's the writer's greatest enemy. If we've seen something before, it doesn't really have impact on us. I mean, James Joyce could have said the sea was colder than a witch's tit. But we've all heard that before. In fact, he doesn't even say it's cold. He doesn't mention cold. But any man who's been swimming in the sea off the UK or Ireland in spring will know what he means by scrotum tightening. Now, I expect you already use plenty of detail in your stories, so how can we take it to the next level? How can we kill the abstraction with a puff of palpability? Well, I think there's a simple trick we can use. And to demonstrate it, I want to look at Maisie Moppet, the girl from the 19th century storybook. Here she is arriving at the house of her uncle Cornelius. He's a professor and an inventor, and he's married to Aunt Morbidia, who is a terrifying battle axe. And I ask Maisie what she wants for her birthday, and she says a bicycle, and they say, well, I can't afford that, we'll buy you some socks. And to assuage her disappointment, Uncle Cornelius shows her his latest invention, the Howdunit machine. It transports the occupant back in time into the pages of a book, and in this case it is aimed at a scandalously licentious 17th century novel about a lady of ill repute and her nocturnal adventures, the merry misadventures of Molly Peascod. There's also a curious item standing next to the machine. It's a giant flea costume about the size of the professor. Now he tells Maisie not to touch anything, but she disobeys and jumps into the machine and disappears in her trice. And thus she is able to exact the horrible revenge on her uncle, which I mentioned earlier, for not buying her the bicycle. And we'll see exactly what she did, and also look at the trick for making scrotum-tightening prose after this short commercial break. Have you ever wondered how much the human soul weighs? Well, the answer is 21 grams, at least according to Dr. Duncan McDougall, an American doctor who, in 1907, famously claimed to have weighed the soul by placing dying patients on weighing scales and noting a small drop in weight at the moment of death. But in certain circumstances, he found the soul was up to 5 times heavier. Why was that? Well, it turned out that these were the souls of people who died without finishing their novel. They ascended to heaven weighed down with regret and lamentation. Don't let it happen to you. Get hold of Gateway to Narnia, your free 10-part email course on how to write your first novel. The link is in the description below. And do it while you still have time. So what's the secret? Well, I think if you look at the great examples of thisness that I cited, you can see that they all have one thing in common. They startle us by juxtaposing completely unexpected items, such as Ajax the mighty warrior and cow shit, or a dead man and a broken heart, or parasites in an angel's wing. So let's see if we can use this insight. Let's see if we can come up with our own unexpected juxtapositions to create some thisness and bring the scene in the boudoir to life. So Maisie arrives in the boudoir of Molly Peascod as she expects a gentleman caller. But there's a slight catch. The parameters of the Howdunit machine have been set such that Maisie arrives as the same size as a flea. This was the reason for the flea costume. The professor had been making a number of visits to this lady's boudoir, and he'd been disguising himself as a flea so he could pass unnoticed among the other fleas. But without it, Maisie's in some difficulty because the other fleas turn on her. So let's create some examples of thisness, some juxtapositions that startle us to bring the scene to life. Maisie found herself with the other fleas infesting Molly Peascod's wig, which was like a forest of greasy trees, and in the branches cornflakes of dandruff were lodged like crushed flying saucers. The air in the room was fetid and chewy. The lady's chamber pot was like the Hoover Dam holding back a frog-coloured sea. The bedsheets were the colour of human lung. Molly's underlinen hung from a washing line, grey and sepulchral like moth pupae fastened to the wall of a tomb. And the chief of the fleas turns to Maisie, and he's dressed in the brown suit of polished armour plates with the face of a walrus. And just then the professor arrives with another suit for Maisie, and she puts it on, and the chief of the fleas falls in love, and is just about to propose to her when a cry goes up from the other fleas. The gentleman caller had arrived, and they said, "Hey, look, there's that man who took all our friends away in his jam jar last time. It's Robert Hooke, and he's come to buy some more fleas for his microscope studies." Ha ha, likely story. Now on the journey back, Maisie asked the professor with the butter wouldn't melt in her mouth insouciance What Aunt Morbidia might say if she discovered he was in the habit of visiting a 17th century courtesan and infesting her wig disguised as a flea. And the professor said, but my only interest in this book was as an example of rare antiquarian literature. And Maisie says, well, I believe you. But would Aunt Morbidia believe you? Are you sure you can't afford to buy me a new bicycle? And a scrotum-tightening fear swept through the professor, and he said, we'll go to the bike shop the first thing tomorrow morning. Well, I hope you enjoyed this and found it useful. Don't forget to get Gateway to Narnia. And if you want to discover a really great page-turning trick I learned from the most beautiful girl who ever robbed me, watch the video that should be on screen now.